we will get started with our 2020 teen virtual programs. Thank you so much for joining us today, Marlene Rivero.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is good to be on with you. I would like to bring to you a story about Harriet Tubman. The theme is imagine your story. So as we progress throughout the next hour, I would like for you to think about your own future, and also remember your past and what your future could be like if you took some challenges and became encouraged to step out of your comfort zone. Harriet was a dynamic woman. She was courageous. She learned to trust other people. But first, during her early life, I would like to show you a little clip and talk about that early life, and I'll come back to you. So if Leah would put the clip on.
Well, when I was about 6 years old, I learned what it meant to be a slave. Yes. My brothers had been working out in the tobacco field, and there was an old lady. She was taking care of us, and she had a stick. It was a sweet gum stick, and she was partial to tobacco, and she had a pipe, and she would sit out in the yard with that switch. And we children would play down by the creek, and we would pick up frog eggs and play with them. All those frog eggs were slimy, and I would pick them up and they would go through my fingers. Well, on this day, my brothers had been out in the tobacco field from sunup to sunset. My daddy and my mama, they had come in and they called us in for our victuals. My mama, she would busy herself there at the fireplace with a black spider pot. And she would cook hash and salt pork. And my brothers was over on the pallet. You see, our pallet had straw in it, and my mama had sewed pieces of material together, and they were talking because they heard out in the field that Master Botus was going to sell some of his slaves, or he was going to hire some of them out. So I commenced to praying. I prayed, I said, Lord, please don't let him take my brothers. Please don't let him take my brothers. Well, we ate our victuals that night and we bedded down. And the next morning, we heard a wagon. It was coming down the road. Clump, and it stopped in front of our cabin. Yes, it did. And they loaded me up on that wagon.
As you can tell from the video, I'm setting the story up for Harriet to tell about her childhood. and the different experiences that she had. She ended up taking the muskrats off the muskrat trap. She got sick. She had the measles and high fever. And the cooks took her back to her mom and dad. Imagine young Harriet, sick, skinny, to point where you could see her bones. You could see the whips that the whip had put on her neck. And she being taken back to her mother and her father going out to get a muskrat of his own so that he could feed, and her mother, old Harriet, could nurse her back to life. Just 6 or 7 years old. Harriet's life at that point was quite miserable. Well, when Harriet got a little bit older and nursed back to health, she was hired out many more times. One time as a babysitter, where she took care of Miss Susan's child. And after trying to get a lump of sugar, she ran because she was scared that she was going to be beaten. She was going to be flogged. And she ran until she came to a hog pen. And she stayed with that sow and 8 little piglets. Can you imagine this life that Harriet was now becoming used to? Then she is hired out into the fields, and she becomes a worker that chopped the end of tobacco plants. She loaded wagons, but she preferred that over the existence as a house slave. Outside, she felt free. Oh, can you imagine this life? Yes. Harriet came back to the Bodas plantation where she had been born. She came back to find her mom on a porch. And 2 of her sisters were chained together on the ground with several other slaves, where the buyers had come up out of the South to take these people on further south of Maryland, where Harriet lived, into Mississippi or to Louisiana, into the cotton fields. She saw her mother on that porch, and she saw her sister's children, one in each arm of her mother, and her mother standing there like stone, because the children and their mothers were being separated from one another. Harriet was never to see these sisters again. And she ran to the edge of the plantation as they were being driven off the plantation to parts unknown. And she screamed, "Lord, how long? How wrong. You know slavery is wrong. Because they were suffering. Suffering from abuse. Suffering from the loss of loved ones. Imagine if that was your story. Well, Harriet worked in that field, and she heard about Nate Turner. She heard that Nate Turner also thought slavery was wrong. And Nate Turner became known as a prophet. And he thought his job was to free the slaves. They had an uprising. They had a protest. And in the uprising, the slaves were killed. Some of the innocents were killed. Nate Turner wasn't found for quite a while. And when they finally did find him, he was hung. But what Harriet thought was the most important part, Nate Turner never apologized. Harriet then heard about another incident of a young slave running from Kentucky. He was running because he wanted freedom. His master was close behind. He ran to the Ohio River, jumped in and swam across. His name was Tice Davis. And Tice was seen coming up on the other side of the river. The master looked around and found the boat. The master got over in Ohio, and he looked around and couldn't find Tice. And Tice was said he disappeared on an underground road. And that's how the term of the Underground Railroad got started. The next little clip I would like for you to see is about the Underground Railroad and how it was started for Harriet.
There was a black man. He was dressed real nice. His name was John Tubman. He liked to tell a joke or two. And he was a free man, had never been a slave. Well, one day, John and I, we got married. We jumped the broom. Yes. I really liked the fact that John was a free man. And I told him I'd like to be free too one day. But John said I need to quit worrying about such. And then he finally told me, if you don't hush talking about getting your freedom, I'll turn you in to the master. Oh, yes. When a man tells you one thing, you don't have to let him know everything you're gonna do. One day I was out. I was working near a road, and there was a wagon that come along, and it was a Quaker lady. And she called me over to her wagon, and she said, "Harriet, if you ever want to go for your freedom, I can help you. You come to my house there in Bucktown." And she gave me the signal that I had to use. Well, Doc Thompson died, and Master Stewart come riding up on his horse. Master Stewart rode past me. Mary Ann, my sister that worked in the big house, she came out on the porch. And I was going to tell her I was going to go for my freedom. But when she saw Master Stewart, she ran back into the house, into the big house. Yes. But I had to tell somebody that I was going to go for my freedom. I had to tell them that I wasn't sold into the South, into Pharaoh's country. And so, as I walked away, I sang the song. When that old chariot comes, friends, I'll believe in you. When that old chariot comes, friends, I'll believe in you. For I'm bound to the promised land. There was people that came to the door, and they were listening, wondering to themselves, what's that Harriet singing? Well, I went back to our cabin. John's in my cabin. And I folded up a quilt that I'd made for me and John. It was the prettiest thing in our cabin. I folded it up and I put it in a basket. And I made my way to that Quaker lady's house. And I knocked. And I said, it's a friend of a friend. And the woman, she opened the door. And she gave me a piece of paper. And that piece of paper told the next station master to put me on the Underground Railroad. You see, I couldn't read or write. So I had to trust her. Yes. I took that piece of paper. I put it in my pocket. That night I ran. I ran so hard. The sticks was breaking. I thought I could hear the dogs after me. I got into the stream. The sticks would grab my dress tail. And I ran all night long. And when I finally got up and went over the hill, I saw that cabin with the green shutters. And I looked at the little town and no one was up. And I walked up to the door. And I knocked. And the woman handed me out a broom. And she said, sweet, the dogs may be after you. Sweet, are the So I swept. And I wondered, did she know what I wanted? And I swept. Did she know that I wanted my freedom? Yes. And the next thing I know, the door creaked open and she handed me out a dip of water. And they brought me into the house and they gave me some victuals and they hid me out for the rest of the day. And that night her husband took me in a false bottom wagon. I hid in under the vegetables. Well, as I was on that Underground Railroad, sometime I would hide in a hollow log. Sometime I would hide under a bridge. Sometime I would sleep in a cold, cold graveyard. And the stone would be my pillow, and the stars were my covering. I made it all the way to Philadelphia, that city of brotherly love. There I met the Philadelphia Vigilance Committee. William Steels was over that committee. He interviewed me when I got to Philadelphia. Oh, and they helped me to find provisions and work. Sometime I worked as a gardener. Sometime I would work as a maid in a hotel or a cook. I did whatever I could do. I was doing this type of work when I met John. John, he was a freed man and couldn't get work. John liked to look good. Yes. And John was using up all of my money. Well, I had worked before I met John, so I thought my family would like to get out of slavery too. Well, I was up there in Philadelphia for about 1 year, and I was at one of those meetings, Vigilant Committee meetings. And they said there was a woman down in Dorchester, Maryland, that they could get out of slavery if they had someone to lead her. And her name was Mary Ann. I said, well, that's my sister. I said, I'll go. They said, but Harriet, you can't. You are a woman. I went back to my quarters and I packed my belongings and I started on my way. I got the monies that I had collected. And I made that trip back, and when I got back into Dorchester, Mary Ann was already being held in the slave pens. She and her 2 little babies. Her husband, John Bowles, was a freed man. He wrote a note telling the guards that Mary Ann and her 2 little babies was to be released to him, and she was to be carried down to the hotel where her buyer was. I was down there waiting. Well, I told John, I sent him a note, and I told him that if he come, I can lead him to freedom in the North. John did not come, woman. Her name was Karen. At first I thought to make foolishness for him. But I decided I had my packages and I may as well head on back north. And I got my packages back to Philadelphia. That's how I first got started as being a conductor on the Underground Railroad. I brought out over 300 captives. Yes. And the masters in the Dorchester area, they had a $40,000 reward on my head.
As you can tell, Harriet, from the little clip, Harriet had started, that was her first trip back into the South, was to rescue her sister and her 2 children. And she started to learn about how to signal the people about when she was going to come back into the area, and they would come to they would come and send messages to the station masters when they wanted to get their freedom. Well, some of the ways that she made contact was through different types of signals. There were signal songs. For instance, deep river, my home is over Jordan. Yes, deep river, Lord, I wanna cross over into campground. That song, when the slaves would sing it in the quarters, it was a song telling that there was a train that was coming through. And so they would sometimes sing another song in response to it. And it would go something like this. Let us break bread together on our knees. Let us break bread together on our knees. When I fall to my knees with my face to the rising sun, oh Lord, have mercy on me. That song told them that the meeting was going to be on the west side of a river, with the sun coming up in the east. Well, the songs varied. They varied, and one song, many people sung from the Protestant religious faith. It says, heaven, heaven, everybody talking about heaven. Oh, I got shoes, you got shoes. All God's children got shoes. When I get to heaven, gonna walk all over God's heaven. Heaven, heaven, everybody talking about heaven, ain't going to heaven. That was a song to make fun of the masters. And they would sometimes snicker to themselves because the master didn't know what they were talking about. Well, the train was leaving the station, and sometimes they would sing songs that would give them encouragement. Imagine that you are one of those people that needs encouragement to make a stand, that you were going to get on this Underground Railroad train. And you would hear, Santa, please don't let this harvest pass. Sinner, please don't let this harvest pass. And I and your soul be lost at last. Well, you got on that train. You got on the train and you're running. And you would sing, wait in the water, wait in the water, children, now wait in the water. Imagine you hear those sounds going through the air. And you would hear it from plantation to plantation. They would be singing it. And you would get into the water so that you would lose the sense of the dogs. Yes. But sometimes Harriet would have her packages. And they would get into different situations, but the Providence had them covered. For instance, one day she knocked on the door and her packages was off in the side of the road near a swamp. She knocked on the door and someone else was living in the cabin. It caused her a little trepidation. She knew that she was in trouble. The man of the house said that the person that lived there no longer lived there because he was caught helping on the Underground Railroad. Yes. And then she had to wait. No food, no way of knowing if help was coming. All she was able to give was a prayer. A prayer to Providence. And sometime when they were on the journey, she would sing, walk together, children, walk together, children. Don't you get worried. Walk together, children. Don't you get worried. There's a great day a-coming in the promised land. That was a song of encouragement. Imagine your story. What have you encountered in your short lives? Have you faced the obstacles that Harriet would have faced? Have you decided to quit along the way? Harriet didn't. Have you run out of money? Harriet, one of the station masters was Thomas Garris. He was a shoe cobbler. Harriet went to him and said that the spirit told her that he had some money for her. He says, how did you know? I just got a letter from England, and it had $20 in it. Yes, Harriet depended on Providence. She had been injured as a teenager. She had an affliction where it made her go to sleep. In inopportune times. But that Providence covered her. She says, I'll go free or die. I'll have liberty or death. If I can't have one, I'd have the other. And she said, when the Lord is ready for me, I'm ready to go. She had faith. She had faith in the providence. And then there's one song that was started during the Underground Railroad. That gospel train is coming. I hear it just at hand. I hear the car wheels moving and rounding there the land. Get on board, children. Get on board. Yes. And I can imagine this last song, which was forbidden for any slave to sing, that she sung it. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home and be free with my Lord. Harriet lived until she was around 93. And she sung this last song before she died. And her friends came and sung it with her, March 10th of 1913. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Imagine your story. Thank you. Now I'm open for questions.
Okay,
Hello?
we're going to let everybody unmute themselves if they want to. Thank you so much for sharing those songs with us. Do you have any questions for the people that have joined us? Started, or does anybody want to chime in with a question for us today?
This is Demestra. Hi, Leah.
Hi, Demestra. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, I have a question. First of all, I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. And my question is, I wanted to know, how do you think Harriet will feel today with all the unrest that is going on in the world?
Yes. I believe that she would have stood with the protesters, and that she was on her way to stand with John Brown in 1858. And believe it or not, in all the years that she operated as a conductor, she never got sick until she was on her way to be a participant in that Harper's Ferry uprising, where John Brown, his two sons, and many others were hung. And so she was willing to give her life, but the fact that the Lord protected her, and I would say protect her because she still had more work to do. And many times people they decrease and others increase. For instance, with Jesus and John the Baptist, and that was a saying out of the Bible. But Harriet definitely would have been for what's going on now.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
I don't see any in the chat, so we may not have very many more, or that might be it. If anybody wants to chime in or type something in the chat, we have a few more minutes.
This is Stephanie Fisher. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed it. And if I can chime in just in the general thought, I think Harriet would be at the front of one of these towns, cities, wherever she would be, right in the front of the peaceful protests.
That too.
I need to unmute this.
But thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for the lovely singing and bringing Harriet to us. And it's just been great to hear your voice this hour. Thank you so much, Marlene.
Well, it's a new way of doing a presentation. Normally I'm in first person. And so I enjoyed the experience. And so I'm pleased that others have enjoyed it as well.
This is Stephanie Fisher. Can I say one more thing? Mrs. Rivero, I just wanted to say that I think this is very important work that you're doing, especially with the climate of today, because our young people need to know our history. They need to know that the fight has not just begun, but that the fight must continue for the right things. You know, I'm not speaking violence or promoting anything like that. I'm just saying that if you know your history, you know where you can go. So it's very important that you're keeping the work of Harriet Tubman alive. She was a very brave woman. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you did a great job of making her so lifelike. You made me feel that you was really Harriet. And I could really sense and feel that time that she was going through. So I really thank you for that also.
Well,
keep up the good work.
Okay. Okay, well. A last thought. Harriet could not believe that there were people out there that would help her. And at first she had such fear. But when she learned to trust in Providence, all the fear went away. And so for that, I thank Harriet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.